invent a new something, and you can erect a dominance hierarchy around it. So if you can't climb the dominance hierarchy that's already here, you can just say, well, here's a new thing, and we'll make a little dominance hierarchy over there. So now you've got the addition of the capacity to transform the dominance hierarchy as another thing that's contributing to dominance hierarchy success. Okay, so I believe that what's come out of that is the idea that, this is such a great idea, is that the top of the dominance hierarchy is the right place to be. But the top of all potential sets of dominance hierarchies is a better place to be. And I think we're selected to be the top of the set of potential dominance hierarchies. And that means, in some sense, if you're at the top, you're not at the top of a dominance hierarchy. You're at the top of... Okay, so now imagine this. So now imagine a landscape. Okay, as far as you can see, it's a plain. And there's pyramids all over it, of different sizes, right? And you're flying above it, and you zoom into a pyramid, and you see all people packed inside trying to climb to the top. But there's pyramids everywhere where people are doing this, but you're flying along the top. Okay, well, that's, as far as I can tell, that's the Egyptian god Horus. Horus isn't in the pyramid, he's above the pyramid. So, and he's the eye, because Horus is the eye. And so Horus stands for attention. And so there's this idea that the Egyptians start to play with, that one of the most important gods is Osiris, and he's like god of the pyramid. He stands for security and stability and the past. But he can be wiped out by various means, so he's not permanent enough in some sense, or he lacks something.
Is this the father archetype, essentially?
Yes, Osiris is the father, yeah, the great father. It's half of the archetype, because he's sort of the positive element of the great father. He's not the negative element, although he makes himself susceptible to the negative element by being willfully blind. Okay, so his son is Horus, and Horus is the eye, and Horus pays attention. So the Egyptians are starting to get the idea that, well, you should be Osiris. That means you're the embodiment of the dominance hierarchy, say. But you also should be Horus, which is the thing that pays attention, because the dominance hierarchy, as it's currently structured, may be restructured. And then, so you don't want to just be adapted to this dominance hierarchy. You want to be adapted so if it transforms its structure, that's no problem for you, because you're not stuck in it. You're in it and not in it at the same time. And that's the big contribution of Egyptian thought. I think it's brilliant, brilliant.
If we could, just a slight tangent from that. So what you're talking about there is, just to make the distinction clear for other people, when the Egyptians are experimenting with the idea of representing them in imagistic form or in art living form, are you saying that they're doing this consciously, or this is like some sort of natural,
happens automatically,
next level of representation?
Yeah, well, think about it this way. So imagine that one of the things that characterizes whether or not you can climb the dominance hierarchy is how good you are at watching people who can climb the dominance hierarchy and imitating them. Okay, so that means that part of it's going to be built in your biology, because you've been at, the dominance hierarchy has been working on you for a long time. So you have the capability of being the thing that can climb. But then let's say you get an edge by watching someone who's successfully climbing, because they're like adapted to the current circumstances precisely, and you can imitate them. Okay, then the question is, well, what does it mean to imitate them? And what it means is you can model their behavior with your behavior. Okay, so that's a form of that's a form of representation. Okay, now you've got it. Now we're all watching each other, and we find those people who can climb up dominance hierarchies very interesting. So we start to tell stories about them, which is the representation of behavior in image and articulation. So it's like you tell this story about some interesting person that you admire, and then it's a pretty good story, so other people remember it, but then it sort of gets commingled in with some other stories about some interesting people who can climb the dominance hierarchy, and then thousands of you gather, and those stories all have a war over centuries, and what you extract out of it is like the most interesting person who's the best at climbing the dominance hierarchy. And that's where you start to get the idea of the savior. And so it's a bottom-up process. And then once you start to get that, well, then the process can be more than merely, you can start to understand and model in some sense what the principles are that govern success, but it's universal success, right? It's not success in a given hierarchy. It's like, what are the principles that guarantee universal success? So you might say, well, that's the ultimate question of life. It's like, yes, that is the ultimate question of life. So what did the Egyptians figure out? Well, they figured out that Osiris was a good guy. You need him. But he's kind of blind because he's old, and he's willfully blind too. And that makes him susceptible to the forces that want to overturn the hierarchy, but the negative forces, the ones that just want to destroy, that's his brother Seth. So Osiris remains willfully blind, and he lets Seth basically chop him into pieces and distribute him throughout the Egyptian state, so things fall apart, and Seth rules. So the Egyptians had already figured out in models that a hierarchy can become probably corrupted by power and deceit, something like that, right? So it's no longer functioning as it should, and it can continually do that.
Is that a descent into chaos, or
Yeah. Well, it's the demolition of order. And well, that's when Isis makes her appearance, because she's goddess of chaos. It's like, up comes Isis, and her husband is Osiris, and he's all chopped up. So she goes around Egypt. He's not killed because you can't kill Osiris, because he's the dominance hierarchy. You can disrupt it, you can break it into pieces, but it's going to come back together. So Isis wanders around Egypt trying to find his phallus. So she finally does, and she makes herself pregnant with it. And so the idea there is that when the pieces of society fall into chaos, they're still alive, so something new can be born out of them, right? It's like the creative destruction that the economists talk about. Isis makes herself pregnant, and she gives birth to Horus. Now Horus is Osiris' son, but the big difference between him and Osiris is that he can see. He's not willfully blind. In fact, he's the opposite of willfully blind. He's almost only the eye, the famous Egyptian eye. He's also a falcon. And falcons are those things that fly above, and they can really, really, really see. So Horus grows up outside the kingdom. Well, why? Everybody grows up outside the kingdom, because the old kingdom is always corrupt and archaic and willfully blind. So you're always alienated from it. So alienation is like a permanent element of being. But then Horus goes, and because he can see, he sees Seth for who he is, and then he has a horrible fight with Seth, and he wins, and then he banishes Seth. Now, you can't kill him because he's Seth. It's like the fact that dominance hierarchies can become corrupt is an eternal fact, so there's no getting rid of Seth, but you can get rid of him temporarily. So when he gets rid of him, he steals his eye back, and then you think, okay, well, he's got rid of Seth. It's like he's got the kingdom, end of story, but that isn't what happens. Horus takes his eye, and he goes back down to chaos in the underworld, and he finds Osiris down there, and he's sort of like, you know, he's a ghost, he's a shade of his former self. And Horus gives him his eye. So now Osiris can see with the eyes of youth. And then Horus and Osiris go back to ruling the kingdom together. And the pharaoh is Osiris and Horus together, if he's a good pharaoh. So that means he's wisdom and tradition and attention. And that's you're starting to get very close there. Now, the Egyptians identified that Horus Osiris thing with the immortal soul. It's like, yes, they're right. And it's not some trivial superstition. It's their right. That is the immortal soul. It's the thing, it's the best in each person. That's another way of thinking about it. Now, you know, those ideas get much more developed as we get much more civilized. So by the end of the Egyptian periods, they call this the democratization of Osiris. Although only the pharaoh, to begin with, could sort of use the symbolism that was associated with Osiris Horus, it sort of spread down the dominance hierarchy. So, and then for me, what happens after that is that, well, it starts to get universalized, right? So